Hey there. I want to talk today about the concept of finding one's spiritual path and the fact that I think sometimes people use it interchangeably with figuring out what they believe. But I think conflating these two things can be a source of internal conflict and can actually result in somebody not engaging in developing a personal practice because they, as far as I'm concerned, mistakenly believe that both ingredients have to be present before they can start making this stew. And I could be wrong, but that was a fundamental issue for me when I was coming back to spirituality, coming back to the craft, and reinventing my practice. And I think that the reason we conflate these two issues a lot, and the reason it's easy to, is when you go to the bookshop and you go to the section on paganism, witchcraft, spirituality, you're still going to see primarily Wiccan books. But even if they're not Wiccan books, they're primarily books that focus on the craft as a spiritual, as a religious tradition. And while that may be the case, I think that it does people who are interested in exploring this path a disservice, because by presenting the blatantly religious aspects right off the jump, if people haven't sort of warmed up to that idea, it can be an incredibly high hurdle. I think a lot of people, when they first pick up a book on Wicca, are drawn to that path for various reasons and get to the sections about the god and goddess and all of the details incorporated in sort of the Wicca 101 practicums. And the mental process is, well, okay, I can get behind the idea of a god and goddess, but it's somewhat disingenuous. And it's disingenuous because it's clearly not the only option. Paganism is such a huge umbrella. There are so many different ways of viewing the divine. There's a lot of variety in terms of individual beliefs, and that's part of what makes paganism so attractive and charming to a lot of people. But then, as soon as they decide to start exploring it, right off the bat, they're being asked to have faith. That strikes me as very much a component of the revealed religions, right? Here is the way it is. Here is the formula. These are the things you must embrace. But I think most people engaged in a pagan practice would agree that it's an experiential path, not a revealed one. Yet, despite this general agreement that it's an experiential path, we don't necessarily talk about what that means in terms of practice. And to me, what that means in terms of practice is you develop a personal practice first. You find the behaviors, the patterns of engagement with the world, the self-care rituals. You build those first. And that is the path that leads to the belief end of whatever spiritual journey you happen to be on. You get to belief, to enlightenment, to discovering what it is that sounds and seems right to you by experiencing, which means that you start by trial and error, wandering around, following different forks in the road, and through experience get closer and closer to a point where your mental models of how things work, why things work, what resonates with you, what you suspect or feel or hope to be true are discovered. You get closer to those things by doing. And that's not something that is immediately visible right off the bat in your standard Wicca 101 text. And in fact, that might not be obvious watching YouTube witches either, because most of the people who are producing videos, they may talk about this aspect of their personal path, but the ones who have a lot of followers have reams of videos, and having been confident enough to be producing videos on YouTube, usually for years, they have, if not a perfect sense, a pretty firm foundation regarding what they believe. They have pretty strong relationships with whatever their concept of deity is. And that comes across in the videos. I mean, that relationship is why they can produce much of the content that they do. But to somebody just discovering the pagan YouTube community, these are a lot of people who seem like they know what's up, and perhaps I need to get behind the religious or faith end of their practice in order to get the most out of their practice, in order to get going. Like, this is a tenet I have to take on faith. And I think that's back-asswards. I really think that it's the opposite of what will work for people who are not the sort who naturally engage in faith. Now, of course, it takes all sorts. There are people for whom this may not be a problem at all. But butting up against the concept of faith was something that was a source of a great deal of conflict when I was returning to the craft. That was a fundamental barrier that it took me a little while to figure out didn't really exist, and that I could just discard the concept of faith entirely and begin forming a practice, a spiritual path that would perhaps lead me back there. If it had to lead me there, it would do so. If the concept of deity began to serve, it would begin to serve. And so for me, when we talk about things like developing a personal practice, I think the primary focus should be what helps, what works. You can worry about what's true later. The desire to build a personal spiritual practice doesn't necessarily mean that you feel called to any particular religious framework. I think more than anything else, certainly in my case, it was a desire for greater fulfillment. It was a reflection of the fact that I wasn't tending to whole chunks of my personality, my psyche. It was wanting to embrace something that was lacking in my life and then trying to sort out a way to embrace those things. So personal practice, starting on one's spiritual path, can be very much about incorporating first things that tend to your own well-being, engaging in behaviors designed to tap you into those parts of yourself that have been sort of collecting dust on the high shelf while you got on with your day-to-day life. The introduction of ritual baths and meditation or runes, or the creation of particular kinds of tools, or familiarizing yourself with astrology or gems or whatever strikes your fancy, whatever speaks to you aesthetically, whatever is a treat for that part of yourself that has been consigned to the shadows for so long. And as you reach out to that part of yourself and slowly coax them out of hiding, you will gradually work yourself towards figuring out what you believe, which, like I said before, is almost certainly an ongoing process. Ideas that didn't resonate with you at all before may begin to at some point. Things you dismissed out of hand may seem less preposterous because you develop a new angle of view. You begin to appreciate how a different perspective transforms it from something you could never get behind to something that you wholeheartedly embrace. To get there, you first need to make that part of you whole again. The pursuit of enlightenment, sorting out what you believe, that's a marathon. And you cannot expect a starved and neglected aspect of self to be able to make that hike. You have to make that part whole, heal it, tend to it, before it even makes any sense to worry about the details of what is divinity. Do I believe in a God that is the source of all things? Do I believe in archetypes, or am I a hard polytheist? All of that stuff can wait. By all means, explore them if you're drawn to any of those things. I'm not saying don't engage with it. What I'm saying is don't force yourself to engage with it. There is so very much to learn and benefit from. And a strong personal practice, well, I think a strong personal practice must always serve your desires and your well-being. First and foremost, it isn't homework. It isn't that bloody assignment that I know I need to get done, but shit, I'd really rather watch Westworld right now. It should never be that. So if now is not the time to worry about beliefs, if you don't know what you believe, don't worry about it. Start with figuring out what you like and what helps you feel happier and more fulfilled. You will get there in the end or not, based on the practice you develop. Anyways. As for what I was doing throughout this video, I probably should have opened with this, and perhaps I'll edit the video to reflect that, but I've just been making ritual candles, this is how I do that. So I hope you enjoyed the visuals too. As always, comments or questions can be left under the video. Have a good day.